Hey, welcome to the first episode of the Luchin Lee podcast. If you're new here, which everyone should be because this is my first episode, my name's Luchin. I'm a law student trying to learn what it takes to build a startup, which has led me to read many nonfiction books and I'm now starting my own podcast to learn, meet, and share some of the interesting and inspiring people that I've read so much about. I have absolutely zero experience interviewing, so bear with me for my first few episodes and I promise I'll do my best and hopefully improve. If you enjoy the podcast or think you know somebody who would be interested, please do me a huge favor and share it with them. Also, if you'd like to be a guest, please feel free to reach out. My first guest today is Michael Batko, which is the CEO of Startmate. Michael, it's definitely a huge privilege to have you as the first guest on the podcast, and I'm very grateful for you kickstarting this journey.
Amazing. Very excited to be the first one. Thanks
Nice.
so much for lining it up.
Yeah. I understand your timetable is busy, so I'll try get through this as fast as possible. Um, so for context, Startmate is a mentor-driven venture capital fund. It's, to my understanding, its focus is on developing Australia's startup ecosystem and helping founders build their own company. This kind of ranges from early stage advice, funding, and a community of people who are interested in investing and working in startups and also want to build their own startups. Um, this leads to many different fellowships like the engineering fellowship, the media fellowship, women fellowship, and student fellowship. I'm pretty sure you guys have much more, but
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of brings the whole community together. I went through the most recent winter 23 student fellowship where I kind of snuck into the accelerator drinks night and kind of ambushed you into being the first guest on my podcast. And
Love it. Love the hustle.
yeah, and there you one of the things that you said were the duration of this podcast would depend on how good the questions were. So I'll try my best to I'll try to my best to ask questions that you haven't been asked before. Um, yeah. So first off, I heard how you chose your like out of high school when you had to decide your career path. You went through a book of all the possible career paths that you could do and ripped out all the jobs that you didn't want to do, including medicine, law, and kind of just went from there. And you ended up with
Mm.
economics and finance. Um, Career advice that I've read in books from Reid Hoffman and Warren Buffett um is to pick what you're best at and sort of interested in, or pick a job that you'd do if you had all the money in the world or no money at all.
Loved it.
Um, is there anything that you would change today if you had that chance again?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I love the idea of leaning into your strengths rather than working on your weaknesses as well. Like, yes, there's a certain element of our weaknesses that we can improve, but at the end of the day, we can't actually be the best at every single thing. So like you said, the way I actually chose my university degree was literally took a book of every single degree there is and ripped out every single page that I didn't want to do, and then I ended up actually with the most generic thing, I guess, like economics and management, and then my master's was international management, which is even more generic. But the reason I kind of loved it was because it was like, so that was what I'm uniquely good at being across lots of different things. To your question, like what would I do differently or would I actually change it? Yeah, probably actually. Like I actually think I would have chosen kind of software engineering in hindsight, because it's like a real hard skill that I would love to have developed, mostly because I've got so many ideas and I would love to build them all. And I feel like I'm actually just being my biggest blocker right now to not be able to build them, even though there's amazing like no code, low code solutions and you can pretty much build anything these days. But that's probably what I would have changed if I was to choose my university degree again.
You're probably a lot more like entrepreneurial now too, so you definitely have like a bunch of ideas that you'd want to build, but you can't really pursue that. So would you kind of take that founder software engineer pathway rather than the economics finance pathway? Because lots of my friends like these days, like they still like commerce is a really popular degree, but I don't think like many people like really enjoy or want to work in like management consulting or
Yeah.
investing, etc.
Well, for me it was I loved my degree, by the way. Like I
Okay.
again, like economics management and so on. Like it was really interesting from like going a really broad intersection of things, meeting really interesting people, which was actually fundamental to where I am now. And the other part was that I actually was lucky enough to work in finance and in management consulting myself, and actually be able to then also decide of what I don't want to do. Like so often, actually, when we go into our first job or an internship or anything like that, people are like so pressured to essentially be like, all right, I need to find what I really want to do and make sure it's the right thing. But actually loved all the internships I used to do so much more for all the reasons of like, why do I not want that job? And it actually helps you narrow down of what do you not want to do in life rather than what you want to do. So even just approaching that in a different light is super valuable.
Okay, that's interesting. That's yeah, because yeah, obviously the like big four consulting firms and those kind of firms they have really good training programs, but it's like uh people don't necessarily enjoy working there after like 6 months or like a year or 2 years, 3 years. So it's good to hear that you actually
Well,
enjoyed
one
the pathway.
framework I can give you, or like an interesting quote I once heard is management consulting companies are for insecure overachievers and startups are for confident overachievers.
Oh.
Because so the idea of startups is actually the one of like you actually need to go in with a lot of confidence in yourself that you can actually do that and actually change an entire industry from ground up. So it was
And
actually quite
maybe.
an interesting one. So like it's the same type of person, but it actually just goes in with like management consulting. You've got so much optionality and you're giving yourself so much permission to essentially jump between projects but not commit to anything. Whereas with startups, you're committing yourself to something for a long period of time. So yeah, it's a slightly different lens on things.
I've actually heard something similar. It's either like confidence or delusion. And me personally, I'm trying to build my own startup. It might be delusion, but I think it's confidence.
Love it.
Moving on to the next question. Startmate City. I'm sure you've been asked that a lot. To for the audience, my understanding is that Startmate City is a multi-decade plan for Startmate to kind of build Australia's version of Silicon Valley, where our most talented and most ambitious people stay in Australia and build their companies here rather than heading off to Silicon Valley because they think they're able to build what they want to build there rather than here. So the goal is kind of to build a 1 million person city and for people to build, work, and invest in startups in Australia. And yeah, that's kind of gained a lot of traction, especially with state governments who are really interested in bringing Startmate City to their state so that problems and solutions are developed in their state. They can grow more jobs, taxes, and grow their population. What's going on with Startmate City?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Startmate City very much resulted for exactly what you said there. Like the idea of that you want to surround yourself with people who are just as ambitious as yourself. So often we essentially gravitate around the people who share similar values to us, right? So the same thing that happens in startups as well. We always gravitate towards ambitious people. And the idea is to actually create the location where those types of people actually come together. And rather than lots and lots of the Australians and Kiwis actually saying, no, this won't work and actually taking you down, it's actually another environment which is uplifting. Yes, you can do it. And what if you actually build on that even further? And actually that kind of environment that actually really fosters ideas and innovation in itself. So with Startmate City itself, like you said, it's a multi-decade plan. I mean, I framed it up as a 10-year plan. We are kind of 2 to 3 years in. It's a long project, but essentially, I am working on the MVP itself. The MVP itself will be roughly for like 600 to 800 people to actually live and work together. I can't share the location just yet.
Okay.
It is actually happening. It most likely will happen. The MVP itself, the first phase of it anyway, by the end of this year. So very roughly. And then essentially we're doing it for 600 people. Then we're going to do it by a couple of thousand people. And then the concept itself hopefully will be proven for state governments to actually be like, all right, let's actually replicate this concept for 1 million people. Because there's no reason why people shouldn't actually move to Australia itself to make it the most innovative country in the world. Like there is no better country to live in than Australia.
you moved to Australia and worked out quite well. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. Um, it's interesting. The 600 and 800, 600 to 800 people that you mentioned, have they already been picked, or are
Oh
you?
no, so we're not quite at that stage yet. Stage number one is very much the site itself and actually kind of buying the land itself and actually developing
Oh
the,
wow.
the kind of MVP of the city. So we are literally going into property now, which just takes a couple of years. It's a little bit longer than the software side of things.
Yeah.
And in terms of the 600 people, it's going to be, I mean, a lot around the Startmate community and kind of startups in our space. So it's also very self-selected. Not everybody is going to want to move either.
All
I mean,
right.
it's a proof of concept, right? It's
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
pretty rogue idea.
I think that'll probably be targeted to a lot more younger people because they're a bit more willing to go off and do something that their like lives aren't set. Like they don't have a job, a home mortgage, a what else would they have? Car loan. I don't know. Yeah, they're a bit
Yeah,
more free.
potentially. Yeah, like you said, it's kind of the wilds, the dreamers, the people who actually want to make a change and really immerse themselves in goal. And to be fair, that can be all ages as well. But it is kind of like a mindset that you're really looking for.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Even Startmate and Michael Batko have their own MVP along with everyone else. So
Oh,
it's kind of cool.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I say with our Startmate, or like building a city, which Startmate City, that's kind of building a community together. It's I think it's really beneficial for Australia's ecosystem because like building your own company that can be quite lonely at times. So like having a group that's surrounding and supporting you is definitely a really good idea.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, building a startup is incredibly lonely, especially for the founder, because not a lot of people actually understand what is going on and the highs and lows that you go through. So having that supporting community, I mean, whether it's a city or just Startmate itself, because Startmate as an accelerator, as a launch club, as a fellowship, actually provides you exactly with community. And we've seen it now over like 12 years that the biggest takeaway from any of our programs is always the people around you.
That was definitely my takeaway from the student fellowship. Like the I don't know if I should say this, but like the information can be found in other places, of course. But something that you can't really replace, and was definitely for me the most valuable thing, is the people that you meet and the connections that you continually build. Like
Exactly.
I would never have met you if it wasn't for Startmate. So yeah,
Yeah, totally.
definitely.
And
Yeah.
that's right. Like information itself is cheap and like content itself is cheap. You can find pretty much anything anywhere in the world. But it's actually the set of people who come together for the same kind of reason or with the same mindset. That's actually the part which you literally form relationships for life and they can be trajectory changing. And the beauty of Startmate is it brings the right types of people together who are just um very much along the same lines of paying things forward and helping each other out, giving each other the no bullshit type of advice. Like it's really a core to our culture.
Yeah. I'm very grateful that the program actually exists because I'm very thankful that I actually got to be a part of it. So yeah. You mentioned Launch Club earlier, and within the application process, there's you guys kind of used Peter Thiel's Contrarian Question, which is kind of what do you believe that not many people agree with you on? Do you have your own answer to that question?
Oh, I love it. I didn't even know we used that question in Launch Club. What do I believe lots of people don't agree with me on?
It's a really
Um,
hard question. When I came across it in the book, it was like I actually couldn't think of my own answer, to be honest.
yeah, I mean, it's nothing crazy controversial. I mean, one thing that kind of comes to mind are like two things. Well, actually, let me share this one, which is uh, oh, I just lost it again.
Oh no.
It was around oh yeah, meditation,
Oh,
which is I actually feel like that's going to be a really interesting trend in the coming years, where like similar to like physical activity, where we just go to the gym and exercise. I feel like meditation itself has been up and coming, but it still is so undervalued. Where I genuinely feel like in the future that almost will be like the training for the mind, which is almost like prescribed from doctors, but also just like people will like actively do it to train the mind itself. And I feel like that's still very undervalued, even though I think in the tech circles, it's kind of been up and coming. I feel like that's going, like, that can have such a global application for the whole world.
Yeah, I think like the culture mindset towards meditating is it's not quite there yet, but like the benefits are kind of proven. So yeah, there might be a cultural shift, but yeah, anyone that wants to try it should definitely try it out. You do a lot of those kind of things actually, like meditating and like running. I heard you run a lot and do what's it called? Ski dive? No, no, not skydiving. Sorry, I don't know what else going on to there, but you do a lot of like fitness things to kind of like improve your mind, improve your body. There's the startup
Yeah.
striders which you started, I think,
Yeah.
that where you do a 5K run every Saturday morning.
Yep.
Do you want to kind of promote that to like get more people within the startup striders ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm a huge fan of essentially like maybe let's actually take a step back. I'm just a big fan of people setting work life boundaries. Like, so often people actually talk about work-life balance, and balance is really hard because like just work can be all consuming. You can so easily shift the balance into one direction or another. I really like the concept of work-life boundaries, like an actual boundary which you set yourself, which is like something non-negotiable or something that you will or won't do, rather than essentially balancing things against each other. So just a really tangible example is I don't work before 8:30 a.m. in the morning, and there are no meetings then. And this is the time for me to essentially have me time, go do sports, meditate, go for a swim, have a coffee, whatever it is. But literally, that's kind of the boundary itself that I set. So to your point of like, I am actually quite active as well. I play probably 2 or 3 times beach volleyball before work, and from like 6 till 8 a.m. I love it. And I still am at work at 9 a.m. But again, it's the kind of time which nobody can take away from you. On the other side, I also run a fair bit. So for example, like you mentioned, I've created Startup Striders, which is a Saturday 7, 8 a.m. running club across 8 different cities now. And it's essentially the 5K park run, which happens across the whole world. And then we all go for coffee together. And by now it's a group of over 500 people across 8 different cities who go for a run every single week. I mean, not all 500 do it, but it's a pretty cool community that has been built very naturally over the last 6 months, where people just keep joining and joining and joining. So if anyone's interested in running and coffee chat afterwards, that's the place for you.
I would definitely recommend people who want to get into startups get along with that. Especially if you're not fit. It's definitely like an opportunity to kind of grow physically and in terms of like building a community. I think it's great opportunity. It was kite surfing, I think. Kite
Yeah,
surfing is what
kite
you do.
surfing.
Yeah. Do
Yeah,
you
kite surfing is another one of my hobbies. Yeah, I just picked it up randomly. I really like the kind of mix of physical exertion, but also like really technical. So I haven't actually been for a while now, because I've just moved back to Sydney 6 months ago. Whereas in Melbourne, it's actually amazing kite surfing, because we
is
always
it?
have really good wind, and it's pretty flat, so there's hardly any waves.
Uh,
So a fun fact for you is Melbourne is one of the biggest kite surfing locations in the world.
wow. I didn't even know that. And I live in Melbourne, so
Yeah,
that's strange. Do you you should I think I saw somewhere that Melanie Perkins also does that. So maybe you can
totally.
team up with her. Um yeah, all right. So moving on to the next question. What are some challenges that you commonly see in early startups? Or yeah.
Challenges in early startups. I mean, honestly, the challenges never really changed that much. Like startups kind of get disrupted, and the business models get disrupted all the time. But the main challenge that founders have is always the same, is just actually going and talking to customers. And I've seen it. I've been in Startmate now for 5 years. I've literally worked with 10 cohorts now of 15 companies, so like 150 startups by now, essentially. And it's always the same, like the pain and the effort of actually going out to customers and hitting them up on an email, following up, jumping on a call, getting rejection and rejection and rejection. But like getting the feedback on board and implementing it and making the hard decisions, but also doing the hard things like talking to customers. That's actually the part where like, it's like that's what differentiates startups which make it and don't. If you actually listen to your customers and talk to them, actually, because you don't necessarily need to listen to everything they say either, but you actually need to talk to them to understand of, are you building the right thing, and who is the right person that you're building it for.
That's honestly a really good one. When I was first like conceiving my startup idea, I kind of went around my nearest shopping center and like asked like the most random people who didn't look too busy, were like in a rush to fill out my survey if they wanted to. And obviously, like I'm not someone who who really does that or has the courage to usually go up to people and just ask them random questions. So that's definitely a hard one, but it sounds like something like that's definitely beneficial to for early founders
Yeah.
to get.
I mean, especially because you're building a startup for the next 10 to 15 years, it's an incredibly hard journey. And what you actually need to really care about is your customers. You actually need to love talking to them, because they're the people who you're actually helping. And so many people are actually reluctant to do that, even though it actually should be reframed. That is the reason you want to be talking to them, because you know you can do something that will actually make their lives better. And if that is true, then you're actually truly building something that that has benefit to them. So therefore, they actually want to be hearing from you, rather than being reluctant and not talking to your customers and being embarrassed about it.
Mm. That's a good problem. Like, yeah. There's also I think a really common challenge early on is kind of finding a strong team and like a co-founder who really like who you really like work well with and can bond well over, because like you see so many like founders who separate and then the company just goes along with them, like it's a kind of a long-term marriage, and if everything goes wrong, it's like a really terrible divorce. So what advice would you kind of give to founders trying to build their team and find a co-founder?
Yeah, sure. Co-founders are an interesting one. Like sadly I've seen so often people rush into co-founder relationships where they kind of get in the idea, they might have heard of an investor, like you need a co-founder, and then they meet somebody who actually really should be a good first hire, and they just offer them a co-founding position without really knowing them. It's like exactly that. Is like marrying at first sight kind of thing. Like you're literally going to be with the person owning the company 50-50 for the next like 15 years. It's just like, why would you rush into that relationship? Obviously, sometimes there are reasons to do it, but that's probably the most common mistake that I see people really rushing into that. Instead, my advice essentially would always be the one of just voice all of your concerns, and then also just say, hey, we should actually really test how it is working together, because you don't want to be married to me. I am not ready to be married to you either. And so let's actually test it out for 6 months. It's really work together. There's no better test than that. Interviews notoriously are terrible. So by working together, we actually figure out whether we actually get along, whether we even have the same vision, whether we have a style which is complementary. And then 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the line, you can actually make the way bigger decision of whether it's a co-founding relationship. And you can always offer that and do that later down the line. And with hiring, maybe the other piece of advice is that it's so important, like the first 5 hires that you have really do set the the culture actually in the team itself. So getting those people right is really important. And to be honest, often it is actually your family and friends who you're kind of hiring into the company, because it's actually the people who you have known for a long time that you can actually trust with that kind of massive responsibility of actually building the company from ground up and establishing the culture.
That's great. That's great advice. Yeah, with my own startup, or looking at other startups, I see lots of people like rush in together like immediately after the first day. They're like, all right, when our co-founders, we've got on like we've got like a 5-person team and we're doing this and this, which is kind of like in my opinion, that's like a bit too much all at once. Like in my situation, I don't even have a co-founder yet, which like to investors, that's probably not the best thing to say, but I feel like it's like a commitment that you don't necessarily want to make immediately. But in terms of
I
building
wouldn't,
it,
Yeah,
Sorry.
I wouldn't necessarily say that, by the way. Like, whether you are a single founder or have co-founders, I this is maybe the Startmate take and my personal take. There is actually there is no set formula of what is actually best. So even when people tell you need a co-founder, you can totally prove them wrong. And there are many examples of great startups which have solo founders as well. On the other side, there's definitely something to be said for co-founding teams, because as we said, like starting a company, having a startup is actually such a lonely journey. So actually having somebody to be able to go through those highs and lows together, to prop each other up, but bring each other down, and or like raise ambitions for each other is actually really really important. And sorry, when I say bring each other down, maybe bring each other down to the ground floor again, when people were just when they're getting too too big heads or something. So it's like essentially it's a counterbalance to you, which is actually quite nice to have.
Maybe to have a team that kind of humbles you sometimes.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
thing. There's like it's a reality check. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
having co-founders is actually definitely a useful thing, but it's not a necessary thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say I'd say the people that you surround yourself with early on definitely has a great influence on whether what you build succeeds or not.
One of my favorite quotes is actually the one of like, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And that in itself is actually quite an interesting mental exercise, which everybody should do every now and again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a note to my co-founding team, or not co-founding team, my founding team. Bill and Aaron. I chose you guys. um, okay, we'll move on from there. We'll kind of go along the same path. With the Startmate Accelerator companies, um, getting into the program is kind of like a huge milestone for a lot of people. The program gives credibility, gives them access to Startmate program mentors and advice. You also get 120K funding at like a $1.5 million valuation, or you guys match the previous valuation if the company has raised money before that.
That's right.
What kind of like what separates the what separates most applications from the 30 applications that you guys usually get, and how do you like really differentiate between um like number 31 from 30, because you guys
Yeah.
get a lot of applications, and I'm sure there are some applications that you guys want to accept but can't.
Oh, it happens all the time. To be honest, it happens every single time. Um, for context, we get about 1,000 applications a year, and we then invite roughly 100 to the interview days that we have, and we are able to invest in 30 companies a year. That is split between 2 cohorts, so you're kind of looking at 500 to 50 to 15 every 6 months. What do we look for in applications? So to go from the 500 to the top 50, that's a super hard one for us. Like, it's literally the top 10% who even get an interview itself at Startmate. The most important questions are, what is the problem you're solving? How do you actually know it's a problem, which goes into kind of like interviews and traction. And the third one is, and why are you the best person in the world to solve it? Or like, why do you care is really the one. So those are the 3 questions, which those are the first 3 things I read. And honestly, if you have strong answers to those 3 questions, you already essentially have an interview at Startmate. Because if you can show me if you're solving a really big problem, if you can show me you actually know it's a problem, and you can show me that by having talked to X number of people and them telling you they have this problem, and they give you the email, and or even better, they actually put on a credit card, and or even better, they actually put out done a deposit, or even better, they actually literally paid for your product. That's the higher you go into the commitment curve, the more I believe you that it's a genuine problem, right? There's no stronger commitment than somebody literally giving you money to be solving the problem, but it actually doesn't need to be money, right? It can be other types of signups. To the third question, which is then, and why do you care about it? So often people just like solve problems, but similar to the conversation which we had earlier, which was, you're going to be working on this for the next 10 to 15 years. Like there's going to be so many highs and lows. There's going to be some crazy tough times. And the only founders who survive are the ones who really care about the customers so much. They won't give up for anything. They literally will run through walls to make it happen because they care about the customer so much. Because otherwise you give up, because it's like, what's going to actually keep you going? Nothing. Like at the end of the day, if you just started this for a money-making thing, or because you think the solution's cool, like you actually already approaching it from the wrong direction. The only thing that's going to get you through the lows is actually really caring about the customer. So like that, those are the 3 critical questions which are most important.
Yeah, that kind of goes along the lines of being a founder who has the problem themselves, because you'd be so motivated and so intrinsically motivated to solve that problem, because it would not only help you, but the same, like a large amount of people who have the same problem as you. So that's definitely like a good point.
Yeah, it can be a good starting point. Yeah, for sure. Because the only caveat here is that sometimes people get a bit too deep into it, where they're like, I am the customer, and are not open-minded enough to actually see, there's not everybody's just the way I am. So there's maybe a small kind of like caveat there, but otherwise it's much easier to solve a problem that you yourself experienced.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to talk to customers. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
um I promised different questions to kind of to kind of extend the duration of the podcast. So I hope that no one's asked you these questions before. Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg? Who's winning that fight?
In terms of physical fight, Mark Zuckerberg, apparently, based on the training. In terms of intellectual slash like technology fight, I actually back Elon Musk's ability to just make changes very quickly.
Okay.
So it's pretty impressive to see and follow.
In terms of Twitter versus Threads, you think Twitter definitely has the edge there?
Oh, that's my personal take. I definitely think Twitter, it's so hard to disintermediate a massive network effect. And Twitter actually has the contributors, the people actually having an audience. It's pretty hard to, you essentially have to bring over the 1% of people who create the 99% of the content. Those people already have such a huge following. And to reestablish a following on another website is just like, it takes such a long time. So it's like the incentive for somebody who has a massive following on one platform already to actually go on another platform. It's just like, it's so hard to replicate. So personally, big Twitter fan.
I think I'd agree with that, actually, because like something you see with Threads is that everyone's like, in the first week everyone was following everyone was signing up, but no one was really interacting. On Twitter you already have all those interactions, and well, why would the people who have a large following on Twitter kind of move over to Threads when they have what they really want? Who do you want to win in the actual fight, though, like the physical fight?
Oh, I don't have a preference.
You've got to have a favorite.
Not really. Like, I don't actually. I'm personally not that interested in the fight itself. It's probably just a good marketing strategy, if anything.
That's true. All right, next question. Does Michael Batko believe in aliens?
Yeah, interesting. I definitely have never been asked it before.
Yeah.
I do believe in extraterrestrial life for sure. I feel like based on how vast the universe actually is, and how there's literally endless possibilities based on that, it's the likelihood of there not being extraterrestrial life is actually way lower than there's actually being it, because it's almost like the infinity of the universe itself. So yeah, I actually genuinely feel like that would be the case. One of my favorite books I recently read actually was Project Hail Mary, which was super interesting from a conceptual standpoint, because there's a bunch of alien stories in there as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, whenever I think about aliens, it's always like super interesting, and like you want them to exist, but then you're also like super scared, like what if they like enslave us all? And that's, yeah, I don't know, it's strange. It was a strange question, but I was asking. I
Yes,
was
it's a
trying to ask a
good
question
fit.
that you
Yeah,
went.
it's a good thought experiment for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I think we should probably move away from those questions. What's the biggest mistake you've made, and what did you learn from it?
Um, Biggest mistake I've ever made and what I learned from it. One comes to mind, which is my first job, professional job. If I was during my bachelor's, I worked a year at American Express, and I was in the finance team at doing P&Ls and balance sheets. And one of the things that I was responsible for is actually doing the budget for the upcoming year. And I did the budget for the whole 12 months for one of the business units, and essentially got literally filled it all out in a spreadsheet, but all the way at the top there was one toggle which was currency, and instead of selecting US dollars, I would probably selected Australian dollars or something like that, and the exchange rate was like 50% off or something, and that was
Oh no.
submitted, and it went through to HQ, and it all went through, and then 1 month in, we essentially went way over budget. The second month in, we went way over budget. Third month in, we went way over budget. And then somebody asked the question, like, hey, what is happening? Like, why are we actually just keep going way over budget? And then 3 months later, essentially what we realized is that the toggle on
It all started from the bottom.
Oh,
No,
exactly.
no one
Like it
caught it.
started me as an intern, essentially, just like literally doing the toggle wrong, and that was it, and that resulted in like a $50 million kind of budget gap
Oh,
at
no.
at American Express, right? So it kind of goes straight to the CFO, and because it's a big gap. But the learning here, I guess, is just a one of as crappy as I felt as an intern to actually do that.
It must have felt awful.
It always is the responsibility of your manager or your leader to actually like that's what you're responsible for. You're there to essentially like check, but also like pick that up and coach people. And at the end of the day, it always is your responsibility to actually get it right. So it's not even absolving myself from responsibility, because it definitely was my mistake, but it was just such an interesting one, because like I definitely feel that now as a manager, as a leader, that like as I am responsible for the quality of work that everybody at Startmate does.
That's that's really insightful. How do you think you would respond today if like Cameron were to make that mistake?
Yeah, totally. So like we definitely make mistakes, and I definitely want my team to make mistakes as well. If we don't make mistakes, we're almost too comfortable and not experimenting enough. Like I see it very much as a learning culture at Startmate. There's probably a difference between like what is it, like reversible and irreversible mistakes, I think is a great way to think about it. Some mistakes are just not that severe and don't have a big impact. And even if they do have an impact, some of the mistakes that we make can be reversible, irreversible. Again, like the reversible ones are okay, you can always fix them. There's irreversible ones where like you make a mistake and it's there forever. That's the ones which you absolutely can't make. So similar here as a leader, like I can't check and focus on every single thing. I need to have a team which I can trust and have lots of autonomy on, which I love, by the way. It's the only way, in my opinion, to actually operate well, and especially in a highly ambiguous world, such as Startmate. And so to your point of like, if Cam was to make a mistake, I very much just essentially like I would always I always have everybody at Startmate reflect on what actually happened, do a post-mortem, write it up, and then actually share it across the whole team. Because the most important thing is that we actually can learn from that and not make the mistake again. Because we're bound to make mistakes. But the worst thing we can do is then actually just repeat it over and over again and actually not learn from it.
That's I think that's a really good point, and something I admire from. I don't think lots of leaders actually think like that. So it's something that I definitely admire when I hear a leader talk like that. Um, so something interesting that I heard from someone at Startmate. I didn't plan this. This is just
Sure.
this is kind of a weird question. What, like, with Startmate, I heard your presentations. There's a rule where you guys are only allowed 5 words per slide. Is that true? And why 5 words?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the context here is actually for pitch decks. So when I give advice to founders, so it's not necessarily an internal Startmate rule, but it's essentially something that I tell our founders when they create a pitch deck itself. to investors, they shouldn't have more than 20 words per slide. So it's not quite 5, but like 20. Because the idea is that you essentially have one really key message on each slide, and that one message needs to come across, and you need to be so concise that it comes across very, very clearly. And as soon as you have more than 20 words, you're essentially not being concise enough in what you're trying to say there.
Okay, that's I'll
Better
note
than
that
the
down.
5.
Yeah. Okay, so last couple of questions. There are probably like 2 or 3 left. What does Michael Batko do for fun?
A couple of things. Like, one is I love physical exercise, so beach
Yep.
volleyball and running. As I mentioned, kite surfing is another big hobby of mine. The second thing, maybe the more surprising thing, which I don't often talk about, but I'm very open about it as well, is I watch a lot of anime. So I've pretty much watched pretty much any biggest anime in the world, from One Piece to Bleach to Demon Slayer, etc. Like, I know them all, and I've pretty much finished all of them, even though there's thousands and thousands of
Even
episodes.
One Piece?
Absolutely. I just watched it last night. It's episode
nice.
1069
Okay.
or something by now.
Wow. Okay, that's impressive. Actually, I would not have I would not have expected that. I'll let my friends know. They're really big fans of anime.
Yeah, so I literally have a WhatsApp group for anime obsessed techies.
Wow.
We call ourselves, and we just
Wow.
geek out about anime.
No other podcasts would have got that out of you. I'm
That's true.
convinced. um, do you have any books or podcasts that you would recommend to young people to listen or read?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite book, it's a really difficult read though, so only pick it up if you're committed to it, is The Courage to be Disliked. It's an excellent book. It's by a Japanese philosopher. You almost need to read it chapter by chapter and slowly. But it's essentially the whole idea that you can't please everybody, and you need to be comfortable with your own weirdness and with your own uniqueness. And I love that concept of actually just really living up to yourself rather than to other people's expectations.
That's an interesting one. I haven't read that, so I'll definitely check it out. Final question. This is I kind of stole this from Harry Stebbings from 20VC. When he first began his podcast, he when he would get a big guest on, he would say he would obviously thank them for their time, and he would say what would he say? Who are 3 interesting people that I should talk to next? Yeah.
Oh, 3 interesting people who you want to talk to.
And I will reach out to them, so keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you tell me actually first. What kind of insights would you like, or what kind of people do you want to talk to? What do you want to learn?
Well, okay, so within my introduction, I mentioned that last year I set a goal to read a lot of books. The goal was 52 books in 52 weeks. So that was like literally one book every week. And most of the nonfiction books that I chose for myself were there was a broader range. There was obviously some history, some science, some self-development, but the vast majority, like the ones behind me, are they're all like biographies of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. So where most of my interests are with founders and investors.
Yeah.
But in terms of entertaining an audience, anyone interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, right. So kind of like startup funders in Silicon Valley. I mean, the first person who comes to mind is Mason Yates at Blackbird. Blackbird Associate. He has his own podcast called Wild Hearts. So listen to that one as well. He's an excellent host and a very interesting person to talk to, especially about all things startups and VC. Yeah.
Have you been in it?
Start there actually. So with Mason.
Have you been on the podcast?
I have actually. Yeah. So you can listen
right.
to that episode as well.
All right. I'll actually I didn't find that one, but yeah, I'll have to check that one out too. Were there 2 more? Or
Yeah, maybe follow up with me after this conversation and just
Follow
give me a
up.
little bit more about like what you want to turn on, what are you kind of looking for? Because I can recommend so many more people.
Okay, I'll definitely do that. I should probably let you go. The schedule on our Google Calendar was 1 o'clock to 1:45, and since it's 1:51 now, I'm assuming that the questions were good because we did go slightly over. But yeah, I just want to like say thank you for taking the time to join the podcast and kind of kickstart the journey. It's
Awesome.
definitely a privilege to have you, by the way.
Excited to be the first guest on this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do my best to grow it, grow it as large as I can.
Love it.
Uh,
Awesome.
yeah,
So yeah, you can stop it now, I guess, the recording. Thanks so much. Great questions. Well
yeah.
done.
Thank you.